There are engines that were so powerful, so extreme, that America banned them from public roads. Not because they were dangerous, not because they polluted, but because regulators decided that certain levels of performance shouldn't be accessible to ordinary drivers. These weren't race engines, they were production engines that you could buy from a dealership, until the government said you couldn't. Here are 7 engines that were banned because American regulators thought they were too powerful for citizens to own. 1. Nissan Skyline GT-R, RB26, DET twin-turbo, inline 6. The RB26 DET produced 276 horsepower from the factory. That doesn't sound like ban-worthy power until you understand that 276 was a lie. The actual output was closer to 320, 330 horsepower, and the engine was designed to handle 600 horsepower with basic modifications. Japanese manufacturers agreed to artificially limit advertised power to 276 to avoid government scrutiny. Nissan built an engine that could handle twice its rated output, then lied about how much power it made. But here's why America banned it. The Skyline GT-R never officially came to the United States. It wasn't banned due to emissions or safety. It was banned because Nissan never bothered to federalize it. The cost of certifying one model for the U.S. market wasn't worth it for Nissan in the 1990s. So the RB26DD became forbidden fruit. The ban created a black market. Import laws prohibited vehicles newer than 25 years old unless they met federal standards. Enthusiasts smuggled Skylines anyway. The government seized GTRs publicly to send a message. They literally destroyed cars worth $50,000 to $80,000 each because they couldn't be legally registered. Here's the absurd part. The RB26DT wasn't more powerful than American V8. Sorry, from the same era. A Corvette ZR1 made 375 horsepower. A Dodge Viper made 400 horsepower. Both were completely legal. The Skyline was banned through bureaucratic neglect, not because it was too extreme, but the 25-year import restriction meant you couldn't have one until the car itself was old enough to bypass modern regulations. The ban lifted for 1989 models in 2014. The RB26 Dishtad was 25 years old and still legendary. You can legally import Rock 32 and Rock 33 Skylines. Rock 34 SOCF remain illegal until 2024 for the base models and later for special editions. The engine that defined Japanese performance was kept out of America for a generation not because it was dangerous, but because of paperwork. 2. Mazda 13 B-Ray twin-turbo rotary. The 13 B-Ray powered the third-generation RX-7. It made 255 horsepower from 1.3 liters using a twin sequential turbo setup. The engine was so efficient that it produced 196 horsepower per liter, destroying every piston engine of the era in power density. Mazda took a design that displaced less than most motorcycles and made it compete with V8 set. The rotary's problem wasn't power, it was emissions. Rotary engines burn oil by design. They inject oil into the combustion chamber for lubrication. This means every rotary engine produces emissions that piston engines don't. By 1995, American emissions regulations made the 13B RU impossible to federalize without destroying its performance. Mazda tried to keep it legal. They detuned the engine for U.S. models. They added emissions equipment. They reduced boost pressure. The American spec FDRX-7 made 255 horsepower, while Japanese models made 276. Even detuned, the engine couldn't meet emissions standards after 1995. Here's what happened next. Mazda killed the RX-7 in America in 1995, but continued selling it in Japan until 2002. For 7 years, Japanese buyers could purchase a car that Americans weren't allowed to own. The engine worked. The car was safe, but EPA regulations banned it based on emissions numbers that didn't account for how rotaries actually function. But here's the real loss. The 13B RA was tunable to absurd levels. Stock internals handled 400 horsepower reliably. Upgraded turbos pushed 500 Netcher 600 horsepower. Fully built engines exceeded 1,000 horsepower from 1.3 liters. American enthusiasts were banned from accessing an engine that delivered supercar power from a package smaller than a toolbox. The RX-7 never came back. Mazda tried again with the RX-8 and its naturally aspirated 13B MSP. But emissions regulations killed that too in 2011. The rotary engine is essentially banned from America, not through explicit prohibition, but through regulations that make it impossible to sell legally. 3. Shouty wani 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 wani. This was a station wagon that accelerated faster than contemporary Porsches. 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Quarter mile in 13.4 seconds. This was supercar performance in a vehicle designed to carry groceries. Audi partnered with Porsche to build it. Porsche engineered the brakes, wheels, suspension, and helped tune the engine. The result was a family vehicle that embarrassed sports cars. Mercedes-AMG hadn't built anything this fast yet. BMW M Division had nothing comparable. Audi created a category of one. America never got it. Audi didn't bother with U.S. certification. The market for $60,000 station wagons seemed non-existent. Audi sold 2,891 units total, all in Europe. The decision to skip America meant the RS2 became legend through absence. Here's why it matters. The RS2 created the blueprint for every performance SUV and wagon that came after. The Porsche Cayenne Turbo, BMW X5M, Mercedes GLE, 63 AMG, all descend from the RS2. But Americans couldn't buy the original because Audi assumed the market didn't exist. But here's the power reality. The 2.2-liter 5-cylinder wasn't exotic. Audi used variants of this engine in multiple models. The RS2 just turned boost up and let it breathe. The engine handled modifications easily. Tuners pushed 500 horsepower from the same block. America was banned from the engine, not because it was too extreme, but because Audi made a business decision. You can import an RS2 now under the 25-year rule. A 1994 model became legal in 2019. Prices immediately tripled because Americans finally had access to the station wagon that Porsche helped engineer and their government accidentally banned. 4. Toyota 2JZ GTE Twin-Turbo Inline-6. The 2JZ GTE powered the fourth-generation Super Turbo. Factory rating was 320 horsepower. Actual output was closer to 340. The engine's real capability was disguised by Toyota's conservative tuning. Stock internals reliably handled 500 horsepower. Built internals pushed past 1,000. This was an engine designed to be underestimated. The Supra was sold legally in America from 1993 to 1998. Then Toyota killed it, not because of regulations, because it wasn't profitable. The car cost too much to engineer and sold in small numbers. Toyota made a business decision that accidentally banned one of the greatest engines ever built. Here's what made the 2JZ legendary. The block was cast iron, closed-deck design, forged internals from the factory, sequential twin turbos that provided smooth power delivery. Toyota over-engineered it so dramatically that tuners couldn't break it, boost the hell out of it, and it just made more power without exploding. The Fast and Furious effect happened. The 2001 film made the Supra iconic to a generation that was too young to buy them new. Demand exploded. Prices went from $20,000 for used examples to $80,000 to eventually six figures for clean, low-mileage cars. A 1998 Supra sold for $201,000 at auction in 2021. But here's the ban reality. After 1998, you couldn't buy a new car with a 2JZ GTE in America. Toyota installed the engine in other models sold in Japan and international markets. The Aristo, Crown, and later Supra models all used variants, but America was locked out. The engine was available worldwide, except in the country with the biggest enthusiast market. Toyota brought the Supra back in 2020 with a BMW engine. The 2JZ never returned. One of the most legendary engines in automotive history was banned from America not through regulation, but through corporate indifference. 5. BMW 7D/2 V12. The McLaren FAF1 needed an engine. BMW Motorsport built the 70/2 specifically for it. 6.1 liters. Naturally aspirated. 627 horsepower at 7,400 revolutions per minute. The engine redlined at 8,000 revolutions per minute, with none of the flat-plane V8 harshness. It was a Formula One engine that you could drive daily. BMW could have sold this engine in other cars. They didn't. The S70/2 was exclusive to the McLaren FIF1 by contract. Only 106 road cars were built. The engine was effectively banned from every other application by legal agreement rather than regulation. Here's the engineering achievement. BMW built a naturally aspirated VM12 that made 103 horsepower per liter in 1992. Modern engines struggle to match that specific output without forced induction. The S70/2 was so advanced that its technology still impresses 3 decades later. The American ban came through scarcity and price. McLaren FAF1 sold for $815,000 new. Only 64 came to America. You couldn't buy the engine separately. You couldn't swap it into another car legally. BMW owned the design and restricted it to one application that cost more than most houses. But here's what could have been. Imagine if BMW put the S70/2 in a production car. An 850 CSI with 627 horsepower, an M8 prototype with FIF1 power. BMW had the capability, but chose exclusivity. The engine that powered the fastest production car for over a decade was banned from affordable applications through corporate gatekeeping. VEL1. Sell for $15 to $20 million. The 106 cars with SS70/2 engines are investments that appreciate faster than real estate. The engine became forbidden through price rather than law. Mercedes-Benz M275 AMG V12B Turbo. The M275 AMG powered the 2006 SL65 AMG. 6.0 liters. Twin turbocharged. 604 horsepower. 738 lb-ft of torque. The torque number is what killed it. Mercedes had to electronically limit torque in first through third gears because the transmission couldn't handle full power. An engine so strong it broke its own gearbox. Mercedes sold SL65, CL65, and SS65 AMG models from 2004 to 2012. Then they quietly discontinued them, not because they didn't sell, because corporate average fuel economy regulations made selling V12s increasingly expensive. Here's how CAFE works. Manufacturers must meet fleet-wide fuel economy targets. Every gas guzzler sold requires selling additional fuel-efficient cars to offset it. VI12 destroy the fleet average. The M275 AMG got 11 mpg city, 17 highway. Each one sold cost Mercedes thousands in penalties or required selling multiple smart cars to balance the average. The ban came through economics. By 2012, the penalty for selling V12 exceeded the profit. Mercedes could still engineer them. Customers would still buy them. But the regulatory structure made them financial poison. The M275 AMG died not because it was too powerful, but because government fuel economy mandates made it too expensive to justify. But here's what was lost. The M275 AMG was the last twin-turbo V12 you could buy in a Mercedes. The engine that defined AMG XS disappeared. Later, S-Class and SL models topped out with V8A. The ultimate expression of Mercedes performance was regulated out of existence. Mercedes still sells V12Cs in Europe and Middle Eastern markets. American buyers lost access not through direct prohibition but through regulatory structure that makes V12C economically impossible. 7. Ford 427 SOHC V8. The 427 SOHC appeared in 1965. Single overhead cam per bank, hemispherical combustion chambers, 657 cubic inches. Factory rating claimed 616 horsepower, but actual output approached 700. Ford built it specifically to dominate NASCAR after the 427 side-oiler wasn't competitive enough. NASCAR immediately banned it, claiming they were too advanced for stock car racing. Ford protested that if Chrysler's Hemi was legal, the OHE should be too. NASCAR didn't care. Ford couldn't sell it to the public either. The engine was too expensive to produce for regular cars. Development costs were astronomical. Without racing to justify production, Ford built about 50 engines total. They were sold as racing parts, not street engines. The 427 SOHC became the engine that NASCAR banned, and Ford couldn't afford to sell. Here's the performance that scared everyone. The SOHC 427 made peak power at 7,000 revolutions per minute when most V8-7 peaked at 5,500. It breathed like a race engine because it was a race engine that happened to be sized for production. Chrysler protested to NASCAR that the Ford was a purpose-built racing engine disguised as a production design. They were right. But here's the legacy. The 427 SOHC influenced every high-performance Ford V8 after it. The Boss 429, the 460, the modern Coyote and Voodoo engines all descend from lessons learned building the SOHC. The engine that was too powerful for 1960s racing became the foundation for 60 years of Ford performance. Original 427 SOHC engines sell for $30,000 to $50,000 when they appear at auction. Fewer than 50 exist. The engine banned from racing became one of the most valuable Ford parts ever made. Why bans never actually stopped powerful engines? Here's the pattern across all 7 engines. None were banned because regulators explicitly said this is too powerful. The RB26DET and 13BRB were banned through import restrictions and emissions. The RS2 and 2JZ were banned through corporate decisions. The S70/2 was banned through exclusivity contracts. The M475 AMG was banned through KA regulations. The 427 SOHC was banned by NASCAR, not the government. The bans happened through side channels, import laws, emission standards, corporate fuel economy requirements, racing organization rules. None of these explicitly target power output. They target other factors that make powerful engines impossible to sell legally. But here's what all these engines proved. The RB26DET made 600 horsepower with bolt-ons. The 13BRU exceeded 1,000 horsepower in competition. The 2JZ became legendary for handling absurd boost. The S70/2 was F1 technology in street form. The M275 AMG had to limit itself to avoid destroying transmissions. The 427 SOHC scared NASCAR into banning overhead cams. These weren't theoretical engines. They were production engines or limited production engines that customers could buy. They proved that extreme performance was achievable in street-legal form. The bans proved that regulators, sanctioning bodies, and manufacturers themselves decided certain levels of performance shouldn't be accessible. America didn't ban powerful engines through direct prohibition. It banned them through regulatory complexity that made them too expensive, too difficult, or too legally problematic to sell. Engines that should have been available disappeared or never arrived. The irony is that modern engines now exceed all of these banned engines in power. A Dodge Hellcat makes 717 horsepower. A Corvette 06 makes 670. A Ford Shelby GT500 makes 760. These are all completely legal and EPA certified. The engines that were too powerful for America in their eras have been surpassed by engines that regulators now accept. The bans didn't stop progress. They just delayed it. Every engine on this list influenced designs that came after. The lessons learned building engines that were too extreme for their time created the technology that makes modern 700-plus horsepower engines possible. America banned the engines. It couldn't ban the engineering knowledge that built them.